Next on Currents News, during a time of great need, Catholic school students collecting over 100,000 pounds of food for families this Thanksgiving. I'm Emily Drooby, that's ahead.
Also, COVID in New York City. Will there be more restrictions? And looking ahead at a plan to reopen New York City schools. Prayers answered for one religious order in Brooklyn. Cleanup of the Gowanus Canal has begun. Plus, Hispanic Americans are living longer despite their economic challenges. The power of faith and family helping solve the mystery. The news starts right now. Good evening, I'm Christine Persichetti. It's an annual competition where students at Jesuit schools collect food for the hungry while competing for scholarship dollars. And as Currents News' Emily Drooby tells us, while the need to help is much more urgent this year, so is the generosity.
Stacking cans, a small task with a big meaning. Stacking for stability for families who can't afford their Thanksgiving meal, especially after the pandemic wreaked financial havoc for many. This stability coming from students, many who've seen the increased poverty firsthand.
I've seen it on Metro North, which I take. I've seen it on the subways. I've seen it walking to school. That even encourages us more that we have to help out, do everything we can.
The Great Ignatian Challenge, it's an annual competition where 9 Jesuit schools compete for hundreds of thousands of dollars in scholarship money by collecting food. It's brought in over 200 tons of food in just 5 years, but this year the competition is more essential than ever. The number of New Yorkers who say they have food insecurity fears is up 20% since before the pandemic, making food pantries not just a need, but a lifeline for many. These students are helping. Last year's winner, Loyola, has already sent almost 12,000 pounds of food to City Harvest.
Our focus is on fresh produce instead of just canned goods. Most donations that go to soup kitchens and food pantries are often canned goods that are non-perishable.
Their challenge, run by an all-women's board, unique since they're the only co-ed school. This year they collected most items online instead of in person for maximum social distancing. The challenge also going strong just 70 blocks south at Xavier High School, helping people right in their own backyard. Donations going to the Xavier mission, their need has increased by 20% this year. There are already thousands past their 15,000 item goal, meaning the mission will be able to give out 200 Thanksgiving meals and be stacked up for winter.
The work paid off, and it's worth it for all the people who need it. It feels good to know that there's going to be one less person that's hungry.
Not just one, but many families will not be going hungry this year thanks to the hard work of these students. On the Upper West Side, Emily Drooby, Currents News.
Anyone interested in making a donation can go to yougivegoods.com/Great Ignatian Challenge-2020. There you can donate by school. Although Mayor Bill de Blasio said today that he expects New York City to soon become an orange zone, he's looking ahead to allowing schools to reopen.
It will take a lot more testing, a very aggressive approach, a very proactive approach, but we can do it. Testing has to be done, in fact, in advance of kids and staff coming back to school. And constant testing throughout the school year, much more than we've even been doing already.
When schools can reopen, schools that serve special needs students will open first, along with pre-K programs. Then the rest of the schools will follow. The mayor also said it will not happen if families don't fill out test consent forms. Meanwhile, Governor Andrew Cuomo says he's concerned about Staten Island and the number of cases there, announcing today that he is reopening an emergency field hospital on the South Shore to deal with overflow COVID patients. And as we head into the Thanksgiving holiday, many believe if you have a negative COVID test, you're free to socialize without any precautions. But doctors are warning that's not true, and thinking otherwise can be dangerous. Britt Conway reports.
November isn't even over, and the U.S. has already seen more new COVID-19 cases than any other month of this entire pandemic. Yes, there is good news on the vaccine front, but for now,
you have to really be careful.
And part of being careful is understanding the limitations of testing. Doctors Amy Compton-Phillips and Ashish Jha explain.
A negative test does not give you a pass.
When you first get exposed to the coronavirus, your levels are pretty low and then they rapidly increase over the first 5 days.
Think of it this way.
Let's say yesterday I was exposed. If I go get tested today, I won't be positive. But in 2 or 3 days, I might turn positive and I will start being infectious and spreading it even before I have symptoms.
And remember, the incubation period can be up to 14 days. Now, they say the kind of test you get can make a difference, but there are some things to consider there too.
So the antigen tests we know have real issues with false negatives. The PCR test, the line between positive and negative is kind of inconclusive. And so you heard early on in the pandemic when people would test negative and then they test positive again. And that's because their viral load might be just going above and below that line.
At the end of the day, both doctors agree testing isn't perfect. I'm Britt Conway reporting.
Projected presidential winner Joe Biden is building his cabinet. Former Deputy Secretary of State Antony Blinken is his choice for Secretary of State. Foreign Policy Advisor Jake Sullivan is tapped to be National Security Advisor. Other nominees include former Deputy Secretary of Homeland Security Alejandro Mayorkas, named to lead that agency, former Deputy Advisor in National Security Avril Haines as Director of National Intelligence, former Secretary of State John Kerry as a Special Presidential Envoy for Climate, and Linda Thomas Greenfield as United Nations Ambassador, a post that will be elevated to cabinet level. President Trump's legal team is appealing a federal judge's ruling in Pennsylvania. The campaign had tried to stop the certification of the election in the swing state. The judge there dismissed the campaign's attempt to invalidate about 7 million ballots, saying the campaign's arguments lacked merit and evidence and amounted to an attempt to disenfranchise legal voters. Meanwhile, the Trump campaign is now distancing itself from Sidney Powell, saying the lawyer is not a member of the Trump legal team. Trump's personal attorney, former New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani, said she is practicing law on her own. This comes after Powell made a television appearance claiming she has evidence of voting machine fraud in Georgia and argued that Republican Governor Brian Kemp was somehow complicit. Later in the newscast, the director of the journalism program at St. John's University, Professor Mike Rizzo, joins us to examine just how the media is covering this post-election. New York State's top prosecutor is suing the Catholic Diocese of Buffalo and former bishops Richard Malone and Edward Gross. Attorney General Letitia James alleges they failed to protect children and failed to report the sexual abuse by priests for decades. She also filed a motion for full disclosure of predatory priests. She wants a court-appointed monitor to ensure interim Bishop Edward Scharfenberger complies with sex abuse policies and procedures. In response, a Buffalo Diocese spokesperson said they will be reviewing the lawsuit and weighing a response, but reiterated there is a zero tolerance for sexual abuse or harassment, and the diocese has put in place rigorous policies and protocols governing behavior and conduct. A long-awaited cleanup in Brooklyn, the Gowanus Canal, long said by experts to be one of the most polluted bodies of water on the East Coast, getting rid of decades of waste and sewage. Currents News' Emily Drooby reports this is the day one religious order has been praying for.
The sound of dredging, it's heaven to Gowanus locals.
I think it's good. I think it'll be nice to have the environment cleaned up.
The Gowanus Canal might look clear from the surface, but it has become known for its high levels of toxins, pungent garbage-like smell, and what locals call black mayonnaise, thick sludge created by decades of industrial waste and sewage. The canal is so dirty it became a Superfund site in 2010, a contaminated area that can be cleaned up under federal law. That's what's happening now. This dredging marks the start of the EPA's long-awaited action. It's a welcome sight for Father Orlando Ruiz, the pastor of Our Lady of Peace, a church just blocks from the canal.
Well, as the Franciscans, we are called to always be attentive, to be respectful, to be grateful to God's gift to us.
As a Franciscan friar, environmental advocacy has long been crucial for him and his parish community. About 5 years ago, they started blessing the river yearly. Bringing holy water to the waters poisoned by sins against nature. They saw a difference. Now they'll see even more of a difference as the EPA works to remove dangerous pollutants from the canal like lead, mercury, coal tar, and even arsenic. Locals expect all kinds of other things to come up too.
And as my parishioners will say, there's not only tires and wheels from cars or bicycles, there are other things, and the legend and stories of our neighborhood for the Italian population. They used to say that maybe the Gambino family used to throw their guns there.
During the dredging project, 72,400 cubic yards of contaminated sediment will be removed. The price tag is steep, $1.5 billion. But Father Ruiz says it's worth it because protecting the environment is worth it.
Seeing it develop to what is becoming is enriching, and it's very exciting to see it, how we flourish from where we were to where we are now.
The first phase of cleanup here in the Upper Canal is expected to last until mid-2023. Then they'll move down to a different location. Now, it could take a decade to get through the entire canal, but much like this water, a date is still unclear. In Gowanus, Emily Drooby, Currents News.
There's a lot more news headed your way. COVID-19 has hit the Hispanic American community hard, but their life expectancy is still higher than other Americans. Why this paradox is tied to their faith. And the pandemic is forcing changes for one of the most popular pilgrimages and celebrations for the faithful in Mexico. And why a small shop not far from the Vatican is getting a lot of attention right now.
Now you can help us put your faith in the news. The next time you capture a newsworthy event, send us your pictures or video. It's easy. Go to netny.tv/send us, and you may see your submission on Currents News.
We all want to live a long and healthy life, but researchers are studying the behaviors of one group in particular. Hispanic Americans tend to live longer than other ethnic groups, even though their social and economic disadvantages are more profound. Scientists believe the reasons for this apparent paradox could be linked to faith and family. You're listening to the sounds of the Jornada, a Catholic movement made up of young people who come together to celebrate their faith as they navigate their lives. Their journey may help to solve a mystery known as the Hispanic paradox. Princeton University professor Noreen Goldman studies it.
It represents the fact that Hispanics live longer than whites in the United States.
3.3 years longer than whites, according to the CDC, and 7 years longer than Black Americans, even though they face more socioeconomic challenges and have less access to quality health care.
That Hispanics have better health-related behaviors than whites. Predominantly, they're less likely to smoke than whites, but some have also argued that better diets are part of the differential that we see.
Experts are also looking at the power of prayer. An American Heart Journal study finding that prayer triggers a relaxation response, which can help prevent chronic diseases.
Another argument is that Hispanics have more extensive social networks, better social support through family, friends, or church than whites.
That's no surprise to Cincy Hernandez-Cancio, who leads the health justice team at the National Partnership for Women and Families in Washington, D.C.
That social connectivity, which churches are very good at promoting, is very important for anyone, any family, and any community to be able to navigate all of the challenges of living in the United States.
Challenges that Father Manuel de Jesus Rodriguez knows firsthand as the new pastor of Our Lady of Sorrows Church in Corona, Queens, a predominantly Hispanic parish.
They are united, they still spiritually united with their family because of our faith. Well, as you might have heard, Latinos have a lot of health issues, not too much money, struggling in many ways. But Latino got something. Latino got a big heart, wonderful approach of joy and enjoying life.
Another explanation, Hernandez Cancio argues, may have more to do with immigration than with the Hispanic population specifically.
Immigrant! Immigrant! Immigrant power!
When people come to this country, Hispanic or otherwise, they're coming in generally healthier, with better diets, and, you know, being an immigrant is a self-selecting thing. You have to have a lot of get up and go and energy and health to come to this country to start a new life.
Those newly arrived immigrants, especially Hispanics, are using faith and family to help them overcome the challenges of their newcomer status.
Latinos in general tend to be much more focused on family no matter what. You know, hate the sin, but love the sinner. Latinos very much tend to be known for supporting their young people of whatever situations they may be in.
Young people like these members of the Jornada movement who choose to strengthen their faith through fellowship and cultural expression.
You know, it's that fellowship. It's that Latino culture and it's that family oriented that we have. So no matter who comes, we're ready, you know, welcome them with open arms.
It reels them in. Whether it be through music, whether it be through performance art, whether it be through dance.
Be able to bond, especially with the faith that we have. We bond with our religion, we bond with our love for God, and it's something beautiful.
It helps us grow as a family, especially because we're a Latino community.
The Latino community has been especially hard hit by the ongoing pandemic, and their mortality advantage has suffered because of it. But there's hope the effects will be temporary.
Faith makes us joyful and hopeful, and I think that makes life a little bit better and happier.
Professor Goldman told us that since the start of the virus, the toll on Hispanic Americans has cut their mortality advantage almost in half. Whether it will permanently affect their life expectancy going forward depends on the length and severity of the pandemic. A beloved vision of the Blessed Virgin by Hispanics will be closed to visitors. The Basilica of Our Lady of Guadalupe in Mexico will be shutting down on their December feast day. The Mexico City government and the Archdiocese of Mexico closing the church's doors from the 10th to the 13th to avoid spreading COVID. Around 10 million people head to the city for the Guadalupe feast day celebrations every year. If you ask anyone on the Trump legal team, they'll say this election is far from over. Joe Biden, however, is moving ahead with cabinet picks. It's the same difference in the media, depending on who you watch, listen to, or read. The director of the journalism program at St. John's University, Professor Mike Rizzo, is here to talk about the media coverage of the post-election. And Mike, we all know the Electoral College decides who becomes president, but even before results are certified, the media goes ahead and calls a winner. Now, President Trump has not only called for a recount in many states, he's also called for investigations into voter fraud. So, should the media call the winner when one candidate is still fighting and not conceding?
Well, Christine, first, thanks so much for having me today. And you're right, projections have been a tradition in media coverage of elections. And maybe in light of what has happened, and not just in this election, but you may recall in 2000, there was a dispute over re-election results. Maybe those projections should be limited. The projections are based on polling that the networks do, maybe in conjunction with other news entities. And then they decide that, okay, we think this is a state or this is a result that will happen. For the most part, it does. But perhaps it should be more judicious for the media to wait until the state actually decides what to announce as the result.
I guess especially when it gets so close in some of these states. Now, some are openly criticizing the media's coverage of the post-election right now, including, of course, President Trump. Over the weekend on Twitter, he accused the media of being as corrupt as the election. And after Rudy Giuliani's press conference last week, former counterterrorism officer and conservative commentator Drew Berquist had this to say: the fact that the mainstream media didn't cover the Trump legal team press conference tells you everything you need to know about whether or not they want fairness and equality in America. No level-headed American would watch that, hear the examples, and then say they don't have concerns. So, Are journalists asking the questions the American people need the answers to, or are they just focusing on the theatrics of the event? You know, there was a lot of talk about Giuliani sweating, but was there enough coverage on what actually happened in court?
Well, I think that's the perception that people have, and in some cases is an accurate perception, that the media is focused on things that really aren't perhaps as important and relevant as they should be. What are the facts? What are the claims? Words matter, for instance. I'm concerned when a reporter says out of his or her mouth that these are baseless claims by the president, or for that matter, anyone else. So the point is that it's fine to report the facts, and there should be facts reported about whatever any candidate says, and those facts should be accurate. But leave the claims of what's baseless and not to commentators, to experts, to analysts who are not necessarily journalists, but are people who then examine what's going on, and different perspectives of people who find them baseless and maybe not so baseless should be presented to audiences so news consumers can make up their own mind.
Absolutely. Now, big tech has been called out recently for censoring information put out mostly by conservative politicians, including people in the Trump administration. Does that cause people to distrust the Republican Party or other conservative journalists?
Well, my bigger concern is not so much how they feel about the parties, but how they feel then about this merging of what big tech does with what journalists do. Mm-hmm. Big tech companies are not journalism organizations. They are not news organizations that hopefully have high standards of ethics, that have fundamentals that they want all of their reporters, producers, editors, writers to adhere to. They are entities that distribute information, and it could maybe be misinformation. So the point is, what are their codes in terms of deciding who gets limited in what they can say and who doesn't?
Absolutely. A lot to think about. Mike Rizzo, St. John's University professor, thanks for being here with us.
Thank you, Christine.
Still to come on Currents News, ahead of the consistory to create new cardinals, we'll take you inside a little shop in Rome that caters to these princes of the church. Preparations are underway in Rome for the consistory to create 13 new cardinals at the end of the month. And as Christian Campos reports, a little shop in the center of the Eternal City is getting a lot of attention.
This iconic window display in central Rome is ready for the November 28th consistory. Gammarelli, a clerical clothing shop, has dressed priests, bishops, cardinals, and popes since 1798. The display also attracts attention of tourists, since during special events such as conclaves and consistories, many come to see the elegant ecclesiastical vestments. They carry basic clothing items from socks, shoes, and personal care products to cassocks, birretas, choral robes, and even uncommon pieces such as this red cape called ferraiolo or manteo romano, and this formal red coat known as tabarro. Also shown are pieces that have changed over time, such as these golden tassels that in antiquity adorned the sash, now modified by simpler ones in red. Mitres, suquetos, cufflinks, gloves, and pectoral crosses. All the insignia of the members of the College of Cardinals are found here. Also, for the more curious or collectors, these miniature birrettas or cardinal caps are also on display.
Again, that was Christian Campos reporting. For 6 generations, the Gammarelli tailoring shop has dressed thousands of priests and hundreds of cardinals and bishops. Wow. And that is Currents News. I'm Christine Persichetti. Thank you for joining us because we are putting your faith in the news. I hope to see you again next time.